It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway. My friend Mark and I had decided to escape the city and take a hike through the dense woods of a secluded national park. We'd done this many times before, but this time felt different, like there was an unseen presence watching us. The day started like any other. The sun was shining brightly as we set off on the trail, our backpacks loaded with supplies, and a sense of excitement in the air. We'd chosen one of the less popular trails, known for its tranquility and rugged beauty. The path was narrow, winding, and thick with trees that blocked out most of the light. But we were experienced hikers, so we thought nothing of it. By midday, we had ventured deep into the forest, with no other hikers in sight. The further we went, the quieter it became. Birds no longer sang, and the usual rustling of small animals seemed to vanish. I brushed it off as just the nature of the woods, but I could feel something wasn't right. Around 2 p.m., we found a small clearing where we decided to rest. Mark and I sat on the moss-covered rocks, enjoying the stillness, but soon, a strange sensation settled over me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the clearing felt wrong. Mark, oblivious to my growing unease, suggested we explore a small offshoot trail we had noticed earlier. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We packed up and followed the narrow path deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser with every step. Then it happened. I heard the first whisper. It was soft, like a breath on the wind, but unmistakable. I froze, looking around, but saw nothing. Mark was ahead, unaware, his steps crunching the leaves beneath him. I hesitated, chalking it up to the wind or my imagination. But then it came again, closer this time. A voice, faint but clear, saying my name. Ellie. My heart skipped a beat. I turned to Mark, but he was too far ahead. I called out, my voice trembling, "Mark, did you hear that?" He turned around, a confused expression on his face. "Hear what?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. There was no wind, no other hikers, just the trees, standing silent and still. We pressed on, the whispers growing louder, more persistent, now seeming to come from all directions. They weren't just voices anymore, they were urgent, pleading, angry. "Ellie, don't go further. Get out of here." I was paralyzed with fear, but Mark, ever the skeptic, laughed it off. "It's just the wind, Ellie. Let's keep going." As we moved deeper into the woods, I noticed something disturbing. The trees seemed to change. The bark grew darker, the branches twisted unnaturally, and there was a heaviness in the air. The ground beneath us had softened, and the once clear trail had become overgrown, making it hard to see where we were stepping. And then we came across something that made my stomach drop. A weathered old sign, half buried under thick vines and moss, read, "Leave before dusk." My heart raced. "Mark, we need to turn back." But Mark, stubborn as ever, waved me off. "It's just an old sign. Don't be ridiculous." We were too far gone now. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the trail. That's when the whispers returned, louder, clearer, and now filled with a sense of malevolence. I tried to turn around, but the path seemed to stretch on endlessly. The woods around us were closing in, the trees pressing closer, like they were trapping us. And then, just as we reached a bend in the trail, I saw them. Figures. Shadows moving between the trees, just out of the corner of my eye. Tall, gaunt shapes that seemed to be watching us. I could feel their eyes on me, but when I looked directly at them, there was nothing. I grabbed Mark's arm. "We need to leave. Now." His face had drained of color. "What's going on? Why are you so scared?" But I didn't answer. I couldn't. The whispers were now full of anger, shouting at us in a language I didn't understand. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the ground trembling beneath my feet. Suddenly, Mark stopped in his tracks. "Do you hear that?" A low growl. The sound of something moving through the underbrush, heavy footsteps. Something large was coming toward us. Without thinking, I grabbed Mark's hand and pulled him into a run. The trees blurred past us, the trail now an indistinguishable maze of roots and branches. We didn't stop until we reached the clearing again, panting and terrified. But the horror wasn't over. As we caught our breath, we realized the forest was eerily silent again. The shadows had returned, watching us from every angle. And there, just at the edge of the trees, I saw something that froze me in place. A face. A pale, twisted face, its eyes hollow, staring directly at us from the darkness. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed Mark, pulling him back toward the main trail, and we didn't stop running until we reached the park's entrance, breathless and shaken. We never spoke of what happened in those woods. Mark still insists it was just a trick of the mind, but I know what I saw and heard. The woods have a dark secret, and whatever lives there doesn't want anyone to find out. I haven't set foot in those woods since, and I never will. There's something about the silence of the woods that feels like a blanket, comforting at first, but quickly suffocating when it stretches too long. That's what Daniel and his friends, Lisa and Mark, discovered one fateful weekend during their hiking trip into the heart of Black Hollow Forest. The three had been avid hikers for years and decided to tackle this remote trail known for its breathtaking scenery and eerie folklore. Local legends spoke of the Shadow Walker, a ghostly figure said to haunt the forest, stalking those who dared to tread too far into its depths. They laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town ghost stories meant to keep kids out of trouble. But trouble doesn't need an invitation in Black Hollow Forest. The first sign. The hike began normally, the crisp autumn air filling their lungs as they navigated the trail. Fallen leaves crunched underfoot, their colors vivid in the dappled sunlight breaking through the canopy above. They snapped pictures, laughed at inside jokes, and marveled at the untouched beauty of the wilderness. But as the day stretched on, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. No birds chirped. No rustling of small animals disturbed the underbrush. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Lisa noticed it first. "Guys, it's too quiet," she said, her voice tinged with unease. "Where are the birds?" Mark shrugged. "Maybe we're too high up for them." But Daniel had a nagging feeling something was off. He brushed it aside, convincing himself it was just the eerie legends messing with his head. The shadow appears. Around sunset, they decided to set up camp near a clearing. As they pitched their tents, Daniel noticed something odd, a series of deep, claw-like scratches carved into a nearby tree. The marks were too high up for any normal animal. "Looks like a bear," Mark said, though his voice wavered. "No bear claws like that," Lisa replied, backing away from the tree. Nightfall came quickly, swallowing the forest in darkness. The only light came from their flickering campfire. They sat close, sharing stories, their laughter masking the unease settling in their stomachs. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, a distant rhythmic crunch of leaves. Daniel froze, holding his breath. The sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped just beyond the firelight. "Probably a deer," Mark said, though his voice betrayed him. Lisa shone her flashlight into the woods. For a split second, they saw it. A tall, shadowy figure standing impossibly still between the trees. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light back like those of a predator. "Did you see that?" Lisa whispered. But before anyone could answer, it was gone. The descent into terror. The next hour was a blur of terror. As they tried to sleep, the noises returned, this time circling the campsite. Heavy footsteps, snapping branches, and what sounded like low, guttural breathing. Daniel clutched a knife, though he doubted it would do much good against whatever was out there. Suddenly, Lisa screamed. Her tent had been ripped open, the fabric shredded as if by massive claws. She scrambled out, shaking, tears streaming down her face. "It's here," she sobbed. "It's right there." Daniel turned and saw it clearly this time. A towering, gaunt figure with elongated limbs and a face that looked barely human, its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. It let out a guttural, inhuman sound that sent them running into the woods. The chase. The forest was a maze of darkness. Their flashlights barely pierced the gloom as they ran, tripping over roots and crashing through underbrush. Behind them, the creature followed, its heavy footfalls echoing like a drumbeat. Mark was the first to fall. A root caught his ankle, sending him sprawling. He screamed as the creature descended upon him, his cries abruptly silenced. Daniel grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her onward as tears streamed down both their faces. The escape. Somehow, they found the trail. The forest began to thin, and the faint glow of dawn appeared on the horizon. The creature's footsteps faded, but they didn't stop running until they reached their car. They drove for hours without speaking, the events of the night replaying in their minds like a broken record. When they finally reached town, they told their story to the local authorities, but their claims were met with skepticism. Mark's body was never found, and the scratches on Lisa's arms were dismissed as an animal attack.